Hi friends, welcome back. In this episode, we're going to talk about the circle of fifths continued, key signature cheats, the proper notation of accidentals and key signatures, an introduction to rhythmic notation, the definition of common rhythms, tempo, metronome markings, beat, practice advice, and rhythmic notation symbols defined. So let's do it. All the keys on the inside of the circle are the relative minor keys. So for example, the key of C has no sharps and flats, and its relative minor key, A minor, also has no sharps and flats. The key of F major has one flat on B flat, and its relative minor key, D minor, also has one flat on B flat. Minor keys are differentiated from major keys with a small m following the letter, as in this. There are two well-known cheats to help you quickly determine which major key a key signature is. The cheat for flats is this. The flat immediately to the left of the last flat listed can tell you the name of the major key signature. For example, the last flat listed in the key signature of C flat major is F flat. The next flat immediately to the left of F flat is C flat, which is also the name of the key signature. The exception to this rule is the key of F major, as there is only one flat, so you must memorize it as having one flat on B flat. The cheat for sharps is this. Find the name of the major key signature by looking at the last sharp listed and going up a half step to find the name of the key. The key of D major, for example, has two sharps, F sharp and C sharp. C sharp is the last sharp listed. A half step above C sharp is D, the name of the major key signature. Sharps and flats are written in a particular order and location on the staff for key signatures. It is necessary for a musician to know the proper way to write sharps and flats for key signatures in order to have original music performed successfully. Look at this example. In this case, even though these accidentals are exactly the same as these accidentals, look how much cleaner the presentation is on this. The same goes for this key of C flat major. Look how haphazard these accidentals are presented here and how nice and neat they're presented here. The easiest way to learn the proper order and location of accidentals and key signatures is by writing the keys of C flat major and C sharp major several times. For flat keys, start by writing a flat on B flat on the third line up on the treble clef, or the second line up in bass clef, then go up to write an E flat above it, then go down to write an A flat below the E flat, continuing this up and down way of writing accidentals until you have completed writing in all of these notes in this order. B flat, E flat, A flat, D flat, G flat, C flat, and F flat. This is an example of the correct way of writing a C flat major key signature. To properly write in sharps, start with the F sharp on the top line of the treble clef, or the fourth line up on the bass clef, then write in the C sharp below F sharp, then the G sharp above, the D sharp below, the A sharp below, and notice here that it breaks up the down-up pattern, then the E sharp above, and the B sharp below. This is the correct way of writing the C sharp major key signature. Practice writing these out several times so you are comfortable with the proper order and location of the accidentals. Today we'll discuss reading and writing rhythms, in particular the most common rhythmic patterns you'll encounter in the most common meter you'll encounter. In all likelihood, these rhythms in this common meter probably encompass about 95% of the rhythmic notation you'll come across. You will find, as I did, that there are only 43 common subdivisions available, but in order to arrive at this number, we must first define what the term common is by establishing certain parameters, all of which will be defined later in this episode. Number 1. Subdivisions smaller than a 16th note are uncommon in the majority of published music. Therefore, the smallest subdivisions we'll cover will only go down to the division of a 16th note on one beat as the smallest resolution. Number 2. Regarding meters or time signatures, all exercises will be in 4/4 as it is the most common time signature. It's actually called common time. I'd like to mention here that since learning rhythms is the sole focus, one pitch, C, will be used for all the exercises. Trying to determine correct pitches as well as rhythms simultaneously can be overwhelming and frustrating for new students. So isolating the rhythms from the pitches will help you focus on them and internalize them faster. For my more experienced viewers, These exercises are a good resource to help you sharpen your rhythmic sight reading skills. Additionally, in the exercises in my free book that goes along with what we're covering in this episode, 8th note, 16th note, and 8th note triplet flags will be beamed together wherever possible, although flags will not be beamed across rest, since this is considered bad writing form. This is done for 4 reasons. The first reason is to cut down on the page numbers in the book. You can rewrite the examples with the flags unbeamed if desired, and I would highly encourage that anyway. The examples will sound exactly the same. The second reason is to present the rhythms in the most typical format. Most composers and copyists lean toward ways of notating rhythms that require less pen strokes or do not require lifting the pen from the paper. Therefore, beamed flags are the composer's rhythmic notation method of choice. Third, most computer notation programs will automatically beam flags together. And fourth, with the exception of instances where music is written to outline the beat for ease of sight reading, beamed flags ensure less clutter and a page that's easily read. I should mention, however, that you should be able to identify rhythmic subdivisions whether the flags are beamed together or not. A tempo is an indication of speed, or rather, how fast or slow the beats, or pulses, go by. A beat, or pulse, is simply what you would tap your foot to. Tempos are often designated by metronome markings and are sometimes abbreviated to MM. Smaller MM numbers indicate slower speeds, while larger MM numbers indicate faster speeds. There are 3 tempos you can practice along with, and each exercise is identified by an announcement of the exercise number followed by a count-off. Be sure to practice the exercises in the book with the recordings found at my website. I'm not going to lie to you, these are very boring exercises, but they definitely pay off if you are diligent in practicing them. The repetition will begin to make them second nature and, over time, will lead to your ability to not only read them at sight, but also help you figure out how to write rhythms for your own music so other musicians can quickly perform those rhythms. If you will commit 20 to 30 minutes each day to learning the notes of all the major and minor scales, as well as these rhythms, your recognition, understanding, and retention of future advanced concepts I will be introducing will be much faster. There are 3 tempos: 60, 90, and 120 beats per minute. Start with the 60 beats per minute exercises and move on to the faster speeds only when you can play along with the exercises accurately at that speed. You might also try recording yourself playing along with the recordings to check your accuracy and timing. Do not move up to a faster speed until you are able to play the exercise accurately at the slower speed. Rhythmic notation is simply a graphic representation of duration. It is how the passage of time is notated musically. In other words, the notation of rhythms tells you how long, in beats or pulses, a note, or silence, should be held for. The breakdown of the rhythms we'll cover, from the longest note to the smallest possible subdivisions of a 16th note, given our previous guidelines, are as follows. 1/2 note has exactly half the time duration as 1 whole note. 1/4 note has exactly half the time duration of 1/2 note. 1/8 note has exactly half the time duration of 1/4 note, and 1/16 note has exactly half the time duration as 1/8 note. Another way to look at it is that 2 quarter notes take up the same amount of space and time as 1/2 note. 2 eighth notes take up the same amount of space and time as 1/4 note, and so on. One other rhythmic notation symbol that I'll add to this for now is the breve. This is a breve and it has exactly double the time duration of a whole note, which means 2 whole notes take up the same amount of time as 1 breve. It is relatively uncommon, so it won't be covered here, but you should be familiar with it in the event you run into it. Incidentally, whole notes are referred to as semibreves. So this is 1 semibreve, 2 semibreves. The quarter note is usually, but not always, what corresponds to the beat or pulse of a song. In other words, a quarter note is usually what goes along with a beat. In common time, a quarter note corresponds to every tap of your foot. Every time you tap your foot is a quarter note pulse. 8th and 16th notes are called subdivisions of a beat since they are smaller than a quarter note, which represents a beat. 2 eighth notes, for example, happen for every 1 quarter note. In other words, every time you tap your foot, 2 eighth notes can be played for every quarter note pulse. These 2 eighth notes divide the quarter note beat into 2 equal halves, and a group of 4 16th notes will divide that beat into 4 equal-sized parts of 1 beat. One additional subdivision we will cover is the 8th note triplet. The 8th note triplet's duration falls between an 8th note and a 16th note. 8th note triplets are 3 evenly spaced notes that are performed in the space of 2 eighth notes, or in place of one quarter note. The key thing to remember is that they are three notes that are evenly spaced in thirds over one beat, which is represented by a quarter note. As discussed in a previous episode, flags are the little tails that are added to eighth or 16th notes to identify them from quarter, half, or whole notes. One flag identifies an eighth note, while two flags identifies a 16th note. But music is not just notes and sound. Silence has a duration too, and rests are a way of notating the duration of silence in music. These rests here correspond to the equivalent length of time or time duration as the notes previously listed. A whole rest, for example, has the same duration as a whole note, a half rest has the same duration as a half note, a quarter rest has the same duration as a quarter note, an eighth rest has the same duration as an eighth note, and a 16th rest has the same duration as a 16th note. As stated before for the notes, one half rest has exactly half the time duration as one whole rest, one quarter rest has exactly half the time duration as one half rest, and so forth. You can also correctly assume that two quarter rests take up the same amount of space and time as one half rest, two eighth rests take up the same amount of space and time as one quarter rest, and so on. Notice the corresponding equivalent of flags for eighth and 16th rest. For example, this has one flag, and this has two flags. An eighth note has one flag, and a 16th note has two flags. Also notice that a whole rest hangs from the second line down from the top of the staff, while a half rest sits on top of the middle line of the staff. This is what it looks like on the staff. You can think of the whole rest as being heavier, so it hangs from the fourth line down. The half rest isn't so heavy, so it sits on the third line going up. Here is the rest equivalent of silence for a breve. Remember, a breve has exactly double the time duration of a whole note. A breve rest goes entirely from the fourth line to the third line, touching both lines. Hey, thanks for watching the video. Be sure to like and leave a comment below if you have any questions. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button. If you like the music you've been listening to, please check out Then Another Turns by my friends Elena, Gilliam, and Michael Levan at this link.